Jurassic Park grossed nearly $1 billion worldwide.
A #1 film of all time.
It really was the most exciting film I've ever seen.
I think Schindler's List is the best film I've ever made.
I'm watching a maestro.
A master storyteller at the height of his craft.
Do you know he made Jurassic Park
and Schindler's List
in the same year?
In the same year?
I mean, how do you do that? How do you separate them all?
It was horrendous, troubling, and terrifying at times.
I didn't want to be doing Jurassic Park any longer. There were days for me that were so unbearable. More explicit. I didn't want to do the movie anymore.
November 30th, 1992. After 98 days of shooting, Jurassic Park wraps on stage 12 at Warner Bros. Studios. But we'll come back here.
You know, I'm thinking about doing a story about a genetically engineered dinosaur.
It's like the perfect place to take.
It's 1990, and author Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park is flying off shelves.
The latest thriller by author Michael Crichton.
A friend of Spielberg's, the rights to Jurassic Park were never going to anyone else.
And I said, please, let me be the first person to read the novel. He said, if you direct it, it's yours.
Steven snapped it up.
One of my first longest words was Triceratops. The second I read his book, I realized that we weren't dealing with monsters.
When dinosaurs ruled the earth.
Wouldn't it be great to run into a dinosaur and meet up with one without being eaten by it?
2 years later, Jurassic Park was well underway. In fact, the movie enjoys a smooth production, wrapping under schedule and budget.
It was all so new for us.
The actors certainly did their jobs, and they believed who they were, and that's all an audience needs, is to believe that the characters are believing in themselves.
So when shooting wrapped in late '92, many were able to put Jurassic behind them. But for Steven Spielberg, there was a long way to go.
If we were going to have dinosaurs in this movie, they would have to look for me as real as though I were watching a National Geographic special on television. If it didn't look as real as a camera can photograph an elephant today, then I didn't want to do it.
It's the big question. How do we turn these words on the page to real, breathing dinosaurs?
How we were going to get the dinosaurs to run was always going to be the old-fashioned way, through stop-motion animation. And then one day I got a call from Dennis Murin at ILM, and Dennis said that he thought that he could pull off a full-size dinosaur that would be authentic to the eye.
With stop motion, Steven had the best in the world. Trying something new like this was a major risk, but Steven had a long post-production ahead of him. He had to try.
Then we decided, okay, let's go ahead and do a real shot.
Beverly Hills, 1980. An author named
Thomas Keneally leaves his book signing and he goes in search of a new briefcase.
He finds a store on South Beverly Drive where
one survivor living here in Los Angeles, a leather goods merchant named Poldek Pfefferberg,
was selling briefcases.
Poldek, a Schindler survivor,
insisted on telling anybody who would listen about the man who had saved his life.
He walks into Poldek Pfefferberg's store and he asks Thomas what he did for a living. I'm a writer, answered Thomas.
Poldek responded with one thing. I have the best story of the century. Keneally was sold. Accompanying Pfefferberg to Krakow in Poland, Keneally begins stringing together the true tale of Oskar Schindler, the Nazi businessman who saved over 1,000 Jewish lives in World War II. It took Keneally 2 years to complete the novel, until it'll make a hell of a story. Is it true? The book landed on Steven Spielberg's lap, literally.
Sid Sheinberg, the head of Universal, had a messenger come over to my house with this review of Schindler's List, and I read it, and I found it very compelling.
Raised as an Orthodox Jew, the story resonated with Steven.
And when I read the book in 1982 by Thomas Keneally, it was something that occurred to me that I could pass along to my children through what I do best, which is telling stories on film. And yet I wasn't really ready in my own life, because I was making movies about extraterrestrials and movies about, Indiana Jones and sharks.
And perhaps hadn't come to terms with his own heritage at that stage.
Growing up in an Orthodox Jewish house where my parents were indirectly affected by the Holocaust.
I was the object of a lot of discrimination because I was the only Jew in Scottsdale, Arizona.
I was the only Jew in the neighborhood, the only Jew in the elementary school, and I had problems. I was different in that way.
And so Steven wasn't quite ready. He had some growing up to do. But Sid Sheinberg saw Steven's temptation, and in no time, Universal owned the rights to Schindler's Ark. 1983. Steven Spielberg meets Poldek Pfefferberg, the survivor responsible for sharing the Schindler story. Please, when are you starting? Poldek questioned. Steven had an answer. 10 years from now. It was true, he was not prepared for the film yet, And in favor of box office entertainers, he kept pushing it back. Over the next decade, he tried handing the film off several times. Roman Polanski, survivor of the Holocaust, rejects Spielberg's offer, reluctant to relive the experience. Steven successfully swaps Schindler's List with Scorsese's Cape Fear.
Schindler's List was on the table, and then you sort of looked at it and developed it, and all of a sudden Steven realized that, man, he wanted it, so he brought it back.
Before quickly regretting his decision.
I was offered to probably try to do Schindler's List, and then during the process, I realized, that this is really his passion. This is something he's got to go through.
Steven couldn't stall any longer. With the idea of the aging Pfefferberg not living to see the film, Spielberg's guilty conscience fires Schindler's List into pre-production.
I went to Krakow and spent time there, and more than anything else, that transported me into such an urgency to get the story out.
After a decade of growth, Spielberg was finally ready to tell Oskar Schindler's story. But Universal president Sid Sheinberg had other plans. His one condition for Steven was simple. He had to make Jurassic Park first.
Initially, we were going to do all of the dinosaurs more conventionally.
And we were going to use Phil Tippett, who was considered at the time the best in stop motion.
They had the greatest animator in the world working on Jurassic Park, a man named Phil Tippett.
It's all for you, Steven, because we love dinosaurs.
When Jurassic Park was greenlit, the method for bringing the prehistoric to life were the traditional effects Spielberg grew up on.
The same way that Willis O'Brien made King Kong. I look at King Kong and I say, well, that is the state of the art.
But stop motion has its flaws.
We had done many, many tests. We had gotten it to where it looked good enough. Not great, but good enough. 1933 was the state of the art. In between 1933 and today, there have not been any real advancements.
Well, then Dennis comes in and to a meeting and said,
I really think we should do this in the computer.
We think we can do this in the computer.
So again, my name here is Dennis Muren.
Multi-Oscar winning special effects artist Dennis Muren.
And I've been working at ILM since '76 on the first Star Wars.
And everyone said, the computer.
Special effects guru and industry icon Dennis Muren had other plans. He wasn't certain, but he felt these dinosaurs could be the first Hollywood animals made entirely with CGI. Yet, naturally, Spielberg wasn't sure, so he said, prove it.
We didn't want the Jurassic Park dinosaurs to be Disney dinosaurs.
Which is more, kind of a cartoon mindset.
If you really want to make it look convincing, you have to animate every nuance.
Behold the elephant.
Every breath, every muscle, every swallow.
These were uncharted waters, and for Steven, it brought up mixed feelings.
Your father was a computer scientist.
A computer engineer with a pocket protector.
His father was a truly brilliant computer engineer.
My dad was very practical. He wanted me in school, so if I didn't become a filmmaker, I would become a teacher.
Steven had always resisted entering his father's field, and these conversations of CGI reminded him of his hesitation towards computers, a motif echoed in the movie.
I hate computers.
But Steven chose not to worry about the technicalities. After all, his field was in storytelling. When discussing the movie with Spielberg, author Michael Crichton couldn't shake his doubts towards the special effects. Spielberg simply responded with, "Effects are only as good as the audience's feeling for the characters." In a way, this thought was liberating. It wasn't ILM, the hardware, or the effects. The onus was on him to really sell Jurassic Park. After 10 years of waiting and Jurassic Park's photography finally behind him, Schindler's List began shooting in Krakow on March 1st, 1993. Refusing any of the blood money salary, Steven Spielberg arrived in Poland with a different approach to filmmaking.
He said, I've just directed Jurassic Park, everything's storyboarded to the nth degree, this is the opposite.
I wanted the experience to be a personal experience.
He said to me, I'm shooting this, I've made no storyboard. He was allowing himself to be inventive on the day.
To him, Schindler's List had to be made like no other film he'd made before, starting by draining the color.
The entire Second World War is black and white because I was brought up watching black and white documentaries.
Inspired by Showa, he also took a documentarian approach with the camera.
I wanted the camera to sort of be invisible, and to do that, I took what I call news camera approach.
Making the film meant recreating some of history's darkest moments.
All peaceful means were utilized in order to save the peace of the world.
Germany has reduced them to nothing.
Germany has invaded Poland.
For a catastrophe that will cause untold suffering.
Schindler's List is more explicit and more graphic.
My stomach turned right over.
Than anything you may have seen before.
I felt nauseous.
It's horrendous. Troubling. And terrifying at times.
And as emotionally demanding as this shoot was, Spielberg had it worse than most. Because all the while, Jurassic Park wasn't exactly finished.
Now I'm in Krakow making Schindler's List, and 5 days a week I'm doing a huge teleconference. It was a whiplash transition. So they could be in real time delivering the digital dinosaurs, so we can then critique the lighting and the physical movement. A very, very dark, important historical journey. And a popcorn audience digital dinosaur movie. And to have to come home every single night and watch dinosaurs was a living hell for me. There were days for me that were so unbearable. I didn't want to be doing Jurassic Park any longer. I was done with Jurassic Park. It was really disconcerting to go back and forth from one to the next. I wanted to quit at 1 o'clock and send everybody back to the hotel. I didn't want to do the movie anymore.
Put on your yarmulke, here comes Hanukkah.
He was shooting Schindler's List. He left a message saying that making the movie was very depressing.
Everyone working on the film, determined to battle through, found ways to cope.
Somebody brought that song up, they had a tape of it, and that they watched that and it would help them laugh.
What a fine-looking Jew.
After all, everyone knew this was important work.
And it was quiet on the set, and everybody just did their work.
I'm watching a maestro recreate documentary footage. Flawless.
Everybody felt that we were memorializing something. All the pain that I suffered and my crew and cast went through is nothing. It is a weekend in Miami Beach compared to one day in the life of any survivor on any given day of the Holocaust.
After 72 challenging days on set, Schindler's List was over. Despite being one of the most painful periods of his life, Spielberg could look back on with pride, but it was time for the world to decide.
When you make movies, do you want to know what other people think of them?
I care desperately what other people think of them, and because I care so much, I sometimes hold my ears and close my eyes. I'll hide for months sometimes.
Do you think the Academy will finally give Steven Spielberg what he's deserved for too many years, an Oscar for this one?
Well, I sincerely hope that Spielberg gets the recognition that he deserves.
Dinosaurs are coming back to life today in the new movie Jurassic Park.
Today is opening day for Jurassic Park. Steven
Spielberg's dinosaur epic is the movie to see this summer.
It was fantastic. It was so scary.
Jurassic Park is going to be a box office hit.
$50 million.
$900 million.
Now get ready for Jurassic Park merchandise.
Jurassic will be the biggest picture of all time.
Tonight we begin with a movie you have not seen, but a movie that some of you may have survived.
The movie is Schindler's List. Schindler's List, there are no dinosaurs, only ghosts. 6 million of them.
Was hat Sie besonders ergriffen? Ich hat sehr ergriffen, wie getrennt man die Familie, Kinder von den Eltern, Männer von den Frauen.
I'm really happy I'm able to say and admit that I've made a picture that's better than anything else I think I've ever made.
Ja, also ich bin erschüttert, ne? Ich bin vollkommen fertig.
Ich kann jetzt nicht sagen. Es war einfach unglaublich.
Would you like to win an Oscar as a director?
Does it bother you that you've never won an Oscar as Best Director?
No, honestly, I'm not bothered that I haven't won an Oscar because, you know, frankly, there's still time, perhaps someday, to win one.
Arts and Sciences presents Oscar, the 66th Annual Academy Awards.
It's 1994. Jurassic Park and Schindler's List have had their box office runs, but now it's award season. Spielberg's films are nominated for a combined 15 Oscars, but there were no guarantees. He just had the most difficult year of his career. But how would the critics feel?
Welcome to Oscar 66. And the Oscar goes to Alan Starsky for Schindler's List and for set decoration, Ewa Braun.
Thank you, Steven Spielberg.
And the Oscar goes to Dennis Muren,
Stan Winston, Phil Tippett, and Michael Lancheri for Jurassic Park.
Thanks, ILM. Thanks, Tippett.
The Oscar goes to Gary Rydstrom and Richard Hims, Jurassic Park.
I'd also like to thank Steven Spielberg.
The Oscar goes to Gary Summers, Gary Rydstrom, Sean Murphy, and Ron Judkins for Jurassic Park.
And of course, to Steven Spielberg, who made it all possible.
And the Oscar goes to John Williams for Schindler's List.
Steven Spielberg. Thank you.
The Oscar winner and my new best friend is Janusz Kaminski for Schindler's List.
All my friends and supporters, thank you.
And the Oscar goes to Michael Kahn for Schindler's List.
The process was painful, but the result was glorious. I want to thank you, Steven, for the most fulfilling time of my life.
There were no two ways about it. Steven's films were sweeping up. But he had his eye on one award in particular, one that he'd never won before.
The Oscar goes to, this is a big surprise, Steven Spielberg for Schindler's List.
I have friends who have won this before. This is the first time I've ever had one of these in my hand. So, this never could have gotten started without a survivor named Poldek Pfefferberg. I want to thank my wife, who's here with me tonight, for rescuing me 92 days in a row when things got just too unbearable. And my mom, who's here, who is my lucky charm, whom I love very, very much. And to the 6 million who can't be watching this among the 1 billion watching this telecast tonight. Thank you.
It was a touching moment for Steven, a moment he dreamed of for decades. There was one more award to be announced, and it could close off the night perfectly.
And the Oscar for the Best Picture of 1993 goes to Schindler's List. Steven Spielberg, Gerald Molen, and Branko Listwick, producers.
Oh wow! This is the best drink of water after the longest drought in my life.
The accomplishment of a lifetime.
Schindler's List was the experience of my motion picture life. The sad thing is for me, I don't know what I'm going to do next. You know, between Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, I'm going to need years of therapy. Enough said. Thank you very much.